I did print as well for many years, but lately this past year video. And I guess I have tons of experience when it comes to looking for new clients, pitching to them, cold calling. I've been doing that for a long time.
Wonderful. Chris, can you go ahead and share a bit about yourself and your background then?
Yeah, awesome. Hi, everyone. So my name is Chris. I am from Brazil. I'm based in Brazil, although I have lived in many different places in the world. I'm a mostly video journalist as well, but I also work with film and TV, and I've just been interrupted. Sorry about that. Live TV is a very tricky thing, guys. So continuing, as I was saying, I work as a video journalist and as a film and TV producer. So I usually joke that pitching is a lifestyle for me because I pretty much everything I do for the most part is pitching. Pitching for news vehicles, pitching for TV channels, pitching for film production companies. And Susana mentioned her main client. I think it's good to mention that my main client, it's called Channel News Asia. It's an Asian channel, which is interesting to mention because someone from Brazil covering for an Asian channel in English is something that you wouldn't put together naturally, I assume. But it's a good example of how international and how big this market of ours is. So I'm happy to share with you guys more about my experiences as finding clients, preparing pitches, and just going through that process, which is actually ultimately very fun.
Wonderful. So yeah, so basically today's discussion is trying to figure out how do we approach, how do we find, and how we lock in those clients. And so I'd like, why don't you can go ahead and start, Chris, as you just left off. Basically describe what was one of the most difficult clients that you've had in trying to get to become a client, and tell us about the process itself so we can use a real example.
Yeah.
Sorry,
cool.
you're talking to Chris. Sorry.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Okay, so I think my process usually starts with you can't just approach anyone that you consider to be a client. You have to have a certain amount of connection within your material, what kind of content that client may produce. So I use Channel News Asia as an example because they're my biggest client, and I produce and I give them content every week. So in their case, I started working for them during the Olympic Games in Rio in 2016, and it was an interesting thing because they were looking for someone in Brazil just for the Olympics. So obviously, I found them through social media. They were putting ads all over social media, and I was putting ads all over social media. So one thing led to another. We kind of meet each other through that.
And which specific social media channel was that?
Sorry, yeah, Facebook was the platform. Facebook is actually very good for that kind of thing. And I was advertising myself. It's important to mention that you always have to kind of put yourself there. Hey, I'm this guy and I do this and that, because people are always looking at those things, editors and producers. So once I began, I had the opportunity to actually put my foot on the door and show them some work. Then I had a big chance of continuing working with them, and I have since then. It's been 4 years. But I guess the main point here is you have to always remember that producers and editors, especially when they're working freelancing with freelancers on a remote base, it's very tricky for them because they don't really know what you're doing and who you are, and so they have to really build a big trust on you, and that's where you have to focus the more I would say, to build that trust, to actually prove to them that you're a real person doing real work, and that takes time and especially very good communication. You always have to be present, answer all the questions with no hidden information.
Okay.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with you, Chris. Yes, totally. I think that's one of the things they don't teach you when you go to college for this. Sorry to burst in, but I think it's really important because we never see them. When you're freelancing and you're miles away from your client, your potential client, this editor that you've never met in your life, they don't know you, they don't know how you work, you don't know, how they're dealing with things at the newsroom. So in the beginning, it's extremely, extremely important that you build this trust so that they know that you work well and they can count on you. After a while, I'm not saying that you can relax and be kind of lazier, no, but after a while, when they know you and they know how you work and they get to know you a little bit more as a person and a professional, then there's more room for, a little bit more lax to do that.
Yeah. So can you talk then a bit about the process where Chris was fortunate that there was a high demanded event and people were looking and he was promoting himself pretty hard through social media. But can you talk about an event where you yourself had to create the demand and get connected to a specific new client, where you had to reach out and you were the one who did the process to find someone, and talk about developing that trust through that example?
Sure. Yeah, you mean like just cold calling, just looking at, there's an event and we have to reach out to new clients. So the way I did it, because for me, it's also changed a little bit, as the years went by and my experience grew as well, and I had a bigger portfolio. So initially, I also have to say that I lived for almost 8 years in the Middle East. I did not say that in the beginning. So for me, initially, especially when I first moved into the Middle East, I was young. I didn't have a lot of experience. I didn't have a lot of content. So what I did was, and I was also doing more print than TV back then, but I speak Spanish as my native language. So what I did is I went through internet and I looked at each country in Latin America that, the major newspapers, the major radios, TV stations as well. And what I did is I drafted a general pitch. I only changed the name of the TV station. So I drafted a general pitch offering myself, my services, explaining who I was. And also I offered them a couple of pitches of nice, interesting ones that could attract them. So what I did, my modus operandi was send them this email. And then later on, if they didn't reply, then find out who was the person in charge of making the decision to hire correspondents. Sometimes that's easy because sometimes it's right there on their internet or even their phone number. It's there on their website. Sometimes you need to do a little bit of a detective labor of work, meaning that you need to go through their social media, maybe the TV stations or the newspapers' social media to see if you can find out who would be this person of these people who could make this decision. It's a process that can take days. Once you find out the person or persons in charge of this, then you have to find out their email or their social media. Sometimes Twitter is open. You can send an email. Sometimes it's not. So it really depends, with each place. But basically, in the beginning, that's how I operated because, again, I didn't have the connections. Now I can maybe ask a friend or a work colleague, hey, do you know this person who works in this TV station? Can you help me get in touch? It's a little bit easier in that sense now. But in the beginning, that's what I did. I just sat down. It took days, many nights because of the time difference. It seriously took, I would say, from 2 to 3 months until I went through all of the contacts that I had in the list and then hunting down the person in charge, the editor who would decide if they wanted that story or not. But it worked. I mean, at the end of those 2-3 months, I had a few nice clients that that I could start working with.
And can you talk a little bit about the process to identify who is that right person, who is that decision maker? I mean, can you talk about maybe 1 or 2 examples that you've actually had and kind of difficulties and what you did to figure out who was the one person?
Yeah, that's again. I think it comes with experience. For me, it's usually when I finally managed to get in touch with these people and we have an actual phone conversation. Usually, I can see if it's gonna be a good client or a not so good one because they always. I would say that bad clients usually start talking about how big their organization is. Where they're going, their potential. we're growing, we're expanding, we're offering opportunities, and that's when it starts to sound fishy. Like, okay, he's telling me about their future, not their present, and basically they're laying out the ground to tell you we're not going to pay you, or we're going to pay you peanuts. But hey, you're going to be doing such great work that you can add to your portfolio. And sometimes you're like, I've been doing this for almost 15 years. I don't need to, make my portfolio bigger for no money. So for me, that it's one of the main red flags, and I would say that this happens quite a lot. When you don't start talking, I'm not saying that you need to start talking right away about money with your client, but if it's something that they either avoid, or they try to find, don't worry about that, we're still trying to figure it out, I would say, yeah, that doesn't sound very good. And also if they talk about their future rather than their present, like all the great things that they're going to do, and that they're like groundbreaking newspaper for social stuff or things like that. It just, if they avoid talking about money and they tell you what great things they're going to do in the future, doubt a little
Absolutely.
bit.
I always worry about the word groundbreaking, by the way. That's
I know, that's like, it sounds the alert in my head, like, okay, no money or $20.
Yeah, exactly. That happens a lot. Also, Justin asked about identifying the right person, right? I think that's a very tricky situation because
and what would you say? How would you define the right person, Chris? Like, what's either a role title? Like, what are the usual titles for their role? Or like, how would you define that right person?
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, from personal experience, and that works generally in professional life. The higher up, the better the chances of you approaching the decision-making person. So, like Susana mentioned, there's very often companies put on their websites a whole hierarchy of staff, right? I always try to go. Oh, of course, I'm not necessarily going straight to the CEO. Let's call it that way, because that person is usually too busy to answer emails or something like that. But I go to someone that I know that will perhaps take a look at my email or I don't know, my phone call or something, and will understand that there's an opportunity there for them too. Because that's the thing. It's not so much sometimes about how can I put this, who the person are, but how can they read your proposal and something hit them and say, okay, they have something that might be interesting to me. So Susana mentioned about having the pitches prepared. You want to make sure that someone that is always, you're not going to email the accountant, even if you have an in with that person. But let's say if you do have an in with someone that is not directly connected to the content, you want to copy someone that is related to the content. Because if your main strength is original content, for example, you want to email the person that's going to look at, whoa, that guy has a story about, animal trafficking in Brazil. No one that I know would ever approach me with that. And you want to find that person, that will see your strength and give you value for that. So the way, we're all, I assume we're all journalists here. We're all very used to stalking people. Background check is what we do for a living, pretty much. Don't be afraid. Don't hesitate on doing that. Go check their social media. Check their LinkedIn. Check their Twitter. Check their Facebook. And I know this is weird, but do that.
So Chris, can you? So
Chris, has it ever? Oh, sorry. I just wanted to ask Chris, has it ever happened to you? Because it has happened to me that people have asked me, "How did you get my email? How did you get my number?" And it's like, I'm a journalist. If you're asking me this, and you're a journalist and I'm a journalist, then I don't get. You should actually tell me. I'm going to hire you right away.
So
Exactly.
Susana, can you
my
mention?
email and my phone number.
Susana, can you mention some of the ways that you find their specific emails? There's one example you were talking to me about, kind of like you got to go do that investigative work to get to the right person, chase emails. Can you describe kind of like the actual nuts and bolts of that process?
Sure. I mean, it's very varied. There's not like a specific right way to do it. I always start out going to the site's website, and I go up and down looking for contact about. So I first go to contact, and I check if they have email and phone number. If they don't, which sometimes they have one, sometimes they have another one. If they don't have any info, which can happen, or one of those general things that you fill out and then you never know where it gets to. So what I do is then I go to social media. Well, first I Google, the name of the company, what they've been doing, and I take a look at what comes up. The next step is social media. LinkedIn, very useful, because you put the name of that publication on LinkedIn, and usually, there's always a few people who come up, whether it's news editors, cameramen, it depends. Also, once I find out who they are, if I can send them an email, LinkedIn email. Sometimes I can and sometimes I cannot because I don't have LinkedIn Premium. So when I cannot send them an email, what I do is I go to their social media. I go to their Facebook, their Twitter. Sometimes they have really weird names, so it's very easy to find them. Other times they have really normal names like mine, Susana Mendoza. So like 500 appear on Facebook. So yeah, that's how I do it, little by little. Mm-hmm. I take every name that comes up on LinkedIn and I go to the social media until I find someone. Maybe it doesn't have to be the person who makes the decisions, but once you have that name and you have a way to reach out to them, you write to them, hey, I'm Susana Mendoza, I'm living here in California, in Silicon Valley. You kind of pitch out to them and ask them for their help reaching out the person who makes the decision. Sometimes they answer, sometimes they don't, and then you have to continue, searching. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's easier, and they have a phone number and an email. So then, I just call the phone number, and I ask to talk to the person in charge, the international news editor. It depends. Sometimes they send you to the right person right away, and then that's great. Other times you have to go through all of the other minions, who, sometimes they also send you to the right person, or other times they stonewall you for whatever reason that may be. So yeah, it's every time it's different, but exciting.
And you were telling me essentially that your favorite and most successful method for contacting people is through the phone, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Because first of all, once they hear your voice, they know they can also get an idea of who you are. It's not the same as, I think, emailing or messaging is just so much colder than talking to the person. And when you talk on the phone, that's when I call the sales part begins. The sales part is that you have to put yourself, you have to make them think that you are great for them, that they need you. And again, this also depends on who is the other person on the other side of the line. Sometimes they're friendly and nice. I also have to say that I do a lot of Hispanic media. So Hispanic media, in general, people are friendly. I mean, I have stumbled, obviously, upon, people who were not as friendly, but it's been mostly positive. Even when they don't need you and, they tell you right away, like, look, yes, what you're offering is great, but we really don't need this right now. Fine. I have said that with other media, maybe it's not as simple as that because they're not so upfront or they don't like to talk on the phone. But in general, I would say that calling is the best for, to actually get a new client, in my opinion. Because then you can show them what you can do. It's easier to connect with the person on the other side of the line.
And Chris, so for your audience, which tends to be more in Brazil, what have you found to be the most useful platform or method to contact them that gives you the best results, and why?
Actually, my audience, my audience is actually pretty international, right? Because I put myself as an international journalist. So, and I mean, taking a ride on what Susana was saying, I think you have to, the way I use it, the best way for me to find people, it's like that. It's on Twitter or to find pitches, because, on both Facebook and Twitter, their search are very optimized to keywords. So you can find specific people or specific topics, such as pitching or stories, just through that. So you can find a lot, like, if you just do the right research, you can find a lot of stuff. But I also like to add that finding the right, use the word audience. I find interesting what Susana said, because it's very cultural. That's the thing for me. I feel like you can tell as you're communicating to a potential client if they're how much they like the nudging or they do not. How much they like you, as Susana said, nuking them with calls or emails, or just or they're like, okay, we want to keep you on the radar, but we're not gonna like reading 50 emails per week from you. So I think that's for me it's one of the trickiest parts, and that's where social media helps so much, and that's why the whole search thing also helps. Not only to find someone that is looking for a pitch, but what kind of content, what kind of style that person, style of that particular person. What they are. You can see if they're crazy producers that like to hear from people all the time, or if they're just more one at a time. Talk to me in a month. So that's but you want to make sure you know who you're talking with. That's the tricky part. You have to do a lot of research.
And so, can you share any specific keywords that you tend to focus on and use when you're going through Twitter to find people looking for pitches or looking to hire new talent?
Yeah, sure. So you wanna the keywords that I use are the word pitch or pitches or pitching. And also, if you're familiar with Twitter search engine, you know that you can also do sentences. So you can do, for example, pitching stories or accepting stories. So basically, the thought process is what would a editor write on their tweet. That's what you have to think. So they would write, we are accepting pitches, or we're looking for stories. So you just several different searches, and this takes time. Don't think it's gonna take you 15 minutes, because you have to scroll down, read the comments, because what Susana said in the beginning about price, it's very tricky, because it's very often people do. That's very unfortunate that people do that. They hide how much they can offer. So if you find, you do the search, pitch, looking for stores, and you find a tweet from an editor, read the comments, because very often they don't put the price, and then once people start asking about the price, and then you see, the 8th answer, it's like, oh, we're paying, $100 for a video, or 20 cents a word, whatever. So not only find the tweet, but read the tweet and the comments. So again, that takes time. Part of our work is to be salespeople. It's just part of it. But as we said, it's fun. It's actually fun because you learn a lot.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I can understand that not everybody is into it, but I really like it. I don't know, it's the thrill, like you just sit there and you do like an investigative job. Yeah. And then once you find them and you log them in, you're, yes, I did it. I found you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's actually just to add to that. Yeah. That's very much when you go through that process of closing with a client, at least one first job, and then you look back and you say, wow, I started that by, researching this, and then I went to this place, and then you see all the journey until you actually made some money and did some good, awesome work to whomever. The feeling is so good because it's like you won a championship,
it is a championship,
yeah, because it's from first round to the finals, and you did it, and you're so proud of yourself because you actually put all that work and you did it. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, actually, I would say that for people who are starting out, maybe freelancing, or people who haven't been very successful for whatever reason, get clients, you need to put a lot of time. Looking for this small main pool, primordial pool of clients that you're going to begin with, and then work your way. Once you have a few clients that you can live with, that you can make a decent living with, then you can also spend part of the time, working for them, and the other part of the time always continuously looking for more clients. You're like a hydra with many heads that, if they chop one off, another one needs to grow right away, because you can never have just one client. You can't.
Right. And I think
I love our analogies. Go on, sorry.
No, I was going to say one interesting thing. So basically, we talked about the process of identifying the right person, and like Susana was talking a little bit about recognizing within yourself the key value proposition you have, such as a Spanish speaker in the Middle East. Whereas Chris talked about basically being in a spot when there's a high demand and always pushing yourself out there actively, and in the process of identifying the right person. And so, like, you found the right person, you maybe made contact, and you mentioned this a little bit, Chris, but like I'd like to just talk to Susana a bit about how much then do you follow up with them to finally get them to get that next actual like commission of you talk to them, and then how do you get from that, oh yeah, it was nice talking to bam, we got a sale, they decide to commission you out? Like for you just, how long does it take? How often do you go back to them?
Oof, that can vary from client to client. Sometimes it's, almost right away. Oh, we took a look at your portfolio and we took a look at your pitches. We really like them and we would like to commission this story. Other times it can take up to a year, which has happened to me. So you have to be extremely persistent, and there is a very fine line between being pushy but nice, which I like to think of myself as pushy but nice, or extremely obnoxious to the point that they tell you, please don't talk to us again.
So what's that point? Can you describe that in reality so everyone knows in detail? Like what's being too pushy and actually being successfully pushy?
So you have to gauge your audience also. Depending, if you call them and they're very hostile, or, well, like they say things like, oh, I told you that we would get in touch with you, so no need to call again, please. Then I would say, okay, give them a breather. Maybe don't talk to them in 2 or 3 months. If a client doesn't reach out to you in 3 months, then it's very clear that they're not interested, at least in that moment. I wouldn't say throw them off the bus forever. Just, keep them in the back burner, and then 6 months later, whatever, reach out to them again, because they may need you then. So yeah, it is a very fine line, and you have to have also a little bit of the experience to know, or maybe I would say the social inclinations, I don't know, to know if you are being very obnoxious. For me, I sometimes maybe can get very pushy. I try to let go once I feel that they're beginning to be really hostile, like, like, we told you not to call again, don't worry. Then I'm like, okay, this, yeah, they're beginning to get a little pissed off. So, for example, I had one client, the one that I told you took me 1 year. That was a lot of, emails and calls and always. So I would say my strategy also, especially if I'm talking to Hispanic audiences, because I connect way better with Hispanic audiences than with Anglo audiences. So my strategy is to be very nice and fun. Because it's like, if I'm going to kind of annoy you a little, at least let me make those 5 minutes on the phone fun. So, be a little obnoxious, but be very fun, so that they don't hang up thinking, oh my God, this woman is so annoying, I hate her. That they hang up the phone thinking, oh, okay, she's nice, but we may use her next time if we need her. So I would say that it's a little bit up to you to walk that fine line. I really can't tell someone what is the right thing, or you feel it. And I guess it also comes with experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think don't be afraid to try. People, I noticed that I know a lot of people, they get too scared to push because they feel like oh my God, what if they get offended? The other person, no one is,
no one's gonna get offended.
No one is so, exactly. No one is so important or so sensitive that you're gonna hurt their feelings. I mean, if they do that, the problem is with them. Then that's something they have to deal with their psychologist, because if you say something a little bit, pushy, and by pushy I mean, as Susana said, politely push, of course. You're not gonna, hey, what about my story? No, you just like, hey, I'd like to hear about, any feedback about that. I have one woman that I work with, and she's like a very very lovely person, and but sometimes our work is very intense because we've done a series of videos, and with very little time, and it was very full of pressure, and she was getting a lot of pressure from the channel as well, from the channel she was working with as well. And every time she had to get back to me, she was being the middleman between me and the channel. Every time she had to get back to me with the bad news from the channel, she was like so apologetic. She was like, "I'm so sorry. Because she knew I was gonna get upset." But it's a matter of knowing how to communicate. Sometimes I had to push her to, you have to fight with them because I'm not gonna change this. So it's a matter of, as Susana said, you have to know. You always have to be fun. You always have to be. We're journalists. We're communicators by nature. We have to communicate wisely, strongly, nicely. Smile a lot.
If it helps, there's something that I always think, and I think it's really true. There's millions of people who are not ashamed, but they're just shyer and more ashamed of things like this. You have to be the one that is not, because think of if everyone was like this, like us, then it would be so much harder to find our gigs.
Absolutely.
So you have to be one of the ones who isn't ashamed. And also, when your food depends on it, trust me, you will lose that shame for sure if your next meal depends on it.
Gotta think about that food.
Oh yeah, like my rent is due.
Yeah, exactly. Then you're the nicest person in the world. Trust me.
And Chris, besides just being nice or bringing some joy into their life, when you approach clients, you also like to. I think I was talking to Susana about this too. Like, you want to make sure you're also bringing them value every time you contact them, right? So, yeah. So basically, you bring them pitches, right? Can you talk a little bit about what you also try to bring them, and then how you track that process? Any lessons you've learned in tracking? Because like Susana was mentioning, sometimes you'll have clients, but they're not ready now, so you put them on the back burner and you'll bring them back. But how do you, I guess, go about that process of bringing them value, such as like the pitches, and then also tracking which pitches, or lessons you've learned in like tracking which pitches go to who?
Absolutely, 1,000,000%. That's very very important point that you just touched. You have to remember this is a business communication as well. So in business, what matters, because there's always money involved. So in business, what matters it's value, right? So every time I communicate with a potential client or a current client or an ongoing client, I always try to bring some added value. So, for example, let's say my first approach was with a series of pitches. I never approach a potential client, even if it's cold calling or it's just the first approach. I never approach them without at least 2 pitches. Because as I said, you have to already give them some value. You have to already get their attention to prove them that, okay, this guy is he's standing out, because people get a lot of pitches. There's a lot of people in the market. So you have to, there is competitivity. You have to stand out. So I already sent a couple of pitches, good pitches. If they don't reply, or they do reply, but thank you for contacting us, but we're not interested right now. I never just answer, thanks and see you next time. Or if I had to nudge them, hey, did you receive my email? Send another pitch or send another suggestion. Like I actually do that sometimes. If I feel like the pitches may not have worked because it's not the kind of content they're so much interested. It's unclear to me what kind of pitches they're willing to get it. Sometimes I just send a different type of added value. Like, hey, I noticed your social media page doesn't have enough videos. May I suggest that you use more videos? By the way, may I ask why that pitch didn't work, or would that if I change to this angle, would that work? Show them that you're just not opening the door, shouting something, and closing the door. We forget sometimes that this whole online world that we live in, that communication, how real communication is. When you propose an idea to someone live, you don't just go up to them and say a sentence and walk out. You introduce yourself and say something. You ask for the response, and then you counter their argument, and so on and so forth. It has to always escalate. You have to think like little stepping stones. That's a very, very important fact. I'll give you an example just to illustrate a very current example. Recently, I pitched something to Deutsche Welle, but I pitched to a podcast, to one of their podcasts. Now, I have no experience whatsoever with podcasting, but the story was really great. So they answered to me okay, we love your story. We really want to do it. But do you have any experience with podcasting? I said, no. This would be my first experience. You always have to be honest, by the way. I couldn't say, oh, no, don't worry about it. I know a lot about podcast. No, I don't. Sorry, this will be my first podcast. So they were like, sorry, we cannot work with you because, we're Deutsche Welle. We have to put someone with experience to do a story on our podcast. So we long story short, this back and forth resulted in me saying, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to produce some other podcast somewhere else, leave the story on hold, give me a couple of months, I'll come back, we'll do the story. Is that okay with you? They said, deal. Come back to us with a couple of experiences in 2 months. We'll be here for you. We like you. We like your story. This was done in several emails. You never let the ball drop. And I'm already working on a couple of podcasts now. So I should be probably doing this story with Deutsche Welle in about a month or so. So I think that's a good story to illustrate how you can never let the ball drop. Even because if we're thinking career-wise in a long term, this is a small world. People might be, if you have a good relationship with this person that works on Deutsche Welle, maybe they will go to BBC, or maybe you will go to be an editor on BBC and they will get fired for Deutsche Welle and they will pitch something to you. You never know the day of tomorrow. So you always have to keep your connections strong and tight and prepare for the future.
And so, Susana, what do you do to, after you've gotten that first pitch locked in, you've done a project with someone, what exactly do you do to keep the relationship strong or get that next one and start making it a recurring, constant client and building that relationship?
So I send them, first of all, during the call, if I'm able to have a nice, lengthy, quiet talk with them, in the beginning, I always ask them how frequently, they have their contributors contribute to them, like on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, because that way I can also see how much effort I also want to put into it. If it's a client that doesn't pay a lot and they only want a story every 3 or 6 months, then I'm really not going to put as much effort, pitching to them. But in general, I start out with once a week. So once a week, I send them 2 or 3 pitches, depending also on the amount of work that I have. Like, for example, this month, I have a lot of work, so I'm not really pursuing any new clients or doing anything in that sense because I'm overwhelmed this month. Next month, if it gets better and I have less of a backlog, I may start pursuing either new clients or other clients that I had left in the back burner. But that's usually how I do it with every new client. The first story, after it goes well, then after a week goes by, I pitch more stories, and then sometimes they say, oh, we like this one, do this one. Other times, oh, we don't want any. So usually also what I do is I pitch 3 times. And then after the 3rd time, they keep rejecting my stories. I reach out to them asking them what's wrong, in a nice way. Like, oh, I'm just trying to refine my, my pitches to know, what you're really looking for. So I would just like to know, what was wrong with these pitches that I sent you? How can I improve them? So then usually they tell you, like, either, we don't have a lot of money, so we can't really count on you on a monthly or weekly basis. Or they will tell you like, oh, we are looking for this, this, and this, and more focus on this other thing. So they can actually help you, refine your pitches and get more money out of them. So basically, that's usually how I work.
Yeah. Then I guess, are there any other big lessons that you guys have learned throughout the process that you want to share with us before we go off to questions and answers?
Yes. I want to end on a note that, and Chris was talking about it too. I cannot stress how important persistence is when freelancing. And I would say not only for journalism, but especially for us. We're a lot of people. We're all trying to make a living. And there are so many media outlets out there that actually pay, decent wages. So you need to be very persistent, because imagine this editor miles away who doesn't know you. They've never seen you. They don't care about you. At least on a personal level. So you have to be very persistent, because they're doing, they're not thinking every day about you and your pitches and if they want your story from whatever city in the world you're in. You are the one who has to nudge them. You are the one who has to remind them that you exist and that you can do a great work for them. So don't be ashamed to reach out to them and keep insisting. Always remember to keep that fine line between being obnoxious and being nice. But persist and you will get it. You don't even have to have a lot of talent. Just be persistent and be there. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. But pitching, as I said, pitching is a lifestyle in our line of work. I also pitch film and TV projects all the time. It's the same hassle. It's a lot of things involved. It's a lot of investment. It's a lot of time, and it's a lot of competition. It's a lot of people with awesome ideas, awesome projects, and it's not a bad thing that there's all of that competition. You just, at some point, one of your stories will be accepted, and then one thing will lead to another. As I said again, it's little stepping stones. So, but it will take time, maybe years. I've met people that went years without actually selling anything or getting published anywhere. And then eventually they did, and they're fine. It takes time. You cannot let, you have to be okay with rejection. This is,
you will get a lot of that too. Yeah.
Yes. I joked with Justin the other day. Because of my time change, I usually get my answers in the morning when I wake up. So very often I wake up with like 4 emails or 6 emails in a row, like no, and it's very hard to start your day with 6 no's in a row.
Yeah.
But you just get a warm coffee, watch a sitcom or something, and go work on your pitches again and start over. It's part of the work, so you have to be persistent. You have to do it out of passion. I know that's a big cliche, but you have to enjoy it, because this is a tough life, but it's very fun.
Just think about that. Your next meal depends on getting that client. Yeah. That's a great motivator.
Yeah, just think about your next meal, of course.
So now we do questions from everyone else. Please go ahead and write them in the chat section, and then we can go ahead and do the question one at a time and won't miss any. The next one's from Jan. Basically, he says that he has a potential client who actually approached him originally because of some work for some other agency. But a few months have passed. They've asked him to provide some special camera setup tests with no budget. But he doesn't think it's going anywhere, and he's a dilemma. Try to put them on phone and convince them, or just send them more technical content as they asked. Basically, yeah. So what are you guys' suggestion in that situation? Yeah.
So they contacted you, and then they kind of disappeared? Is that the question?
Yeah. I want to understand.
Yeah, and you want to go into detail?
Okay. I mean, I would say it's difficult to say. I mean, what I would do is, if they're a big client, if you check them out and they seem to be a potential big client, chase them. Go after them and tell them, hey, I just wanted to follow up on this because, I may have more commitments and I want to know if you're still interested. That's what I would do. I had cases like that too. Yeah, and if I felt that the client was big enough as to actually deserve chasing after them, then I did. Yeah, I don't care, what they said, not what they said to me, but just do it, just chase after them because it could be potentially a great client. I would say if you look for them online, if they don't seem to be, very big or interesting or that they're doing well, then I don't know, maybe let it go.
Also, you have to remember that people are very busy. Like people are not thinking about you the way you are thinking about them. Like you have to picture editors and producers and etc. As they're getting hundreds of emails, they're going on calls, and they don't have you on the back of their mind at all. So you have to remember them that you exist. And in this particular case, you said it's a super big client that you wrote here, super big client. Do not let it go. Keep pushing. Again, without being obnoxious and all that, but keep pushing. Politely. Just hey, what's up? Especially if they approached you, which is excellent. That's the best way to start. That's rare.
Yeah, that's very rare.
Yeah. So use the momentum. Use whatever you got because if it's a big client, you're almost there. Just keep working on them.
And another thing, Jan, too, is you have to be aware of things that are seasonal. So large clients, corporate clients, are very predictable, but they work in a different way from you and us, where this person during COVID is assured to have a job no matter what, and they work more in a corporate style where it's set up and they have a lot of time off in the summer, and they've set this 6, 7, 8 months in advance. If they don't use their summertime vacation days and they end up losing them. So it's been August, so probably half the team's off in August, so they're having to cover. Either they're off or they're covering for someone, so they just don't have the energy to get back to you. Or they're like pushing really intensively in the organization because of COVID, and they're trying to get more new clients and work things out. Or potentially their end client, who they're working for, is being slow, and so they're just not getting back to you because of that. So exactly, don't give up just because it's been a while. There could be a lot of reasons. Either the summer months have killed everything and no one's responding because they're overworked or they're off on holiday, or their clients off on holiday, or their client is worried about their funding, and so they're like waiting to move things along, and so they'd rather be silent than say that they're out of funds or waiting for funds to come in because they just don't have anything to say.
I had a few times that I had to reach out to people because I needed extra help, maybe filming, or I was going to take a small vacation and I needed someone to replace me. And I reached out to other freelance video journalists. And then for whatever reason, something happened. I changed my mind, and I may have forgotten to continue. So if they reached out to me, I could tell them, hey, look, sorry, things have changed. Or, oh, yeah, you're right. Let's do this. Again, it's true what Chris said. You have to remember that editors and people in charge don't think about you the way you think about them. It's never like that. They have to. They're probably very busy. They have dozens of people like you. They have their own lives to think about. So you are the one who has to push them always. They're not going to come and push you unless it's something extremely urgent for them. So, think about that. So that should motivate us, I guess, to pursue them.
Any other questions? You all have specific ones?
You can ask us anything, even gossip.
Absolutely anything. We love gossip, as a matter of fact. We both with Luis. That's all. Pretty much all we do.
If we could only talk openly, Chris.
Susana, what do you do if you're trying to push with one specific contact at a publication and it's kind of going nowhere? Do you go above their head? How do you make that decision to call their boss?
Yeah, I had to do that sometimes. Yeah, not a lot, thankfully, but sometimes they stonewall you for who knows what reasons. Because either they don't want to deal with you, maybe because they're not the person in charge, but they don't want you to go to the boss. I really don't know why it's happened. So then if you feel, if it's been a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, and you're not getting anywhere with this specific contact that answers the emails and or the phone, then go around this person. Go to LinkedIn, see who is above her or him, and then reach out to this person as much as you can.
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't. Go ahead.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
This is your opportunity to get the insights, the real inside of the job. No,
Yeah.
won't hold back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess always it's very important to always be prepared for when you actually have. Let's say you are in a more advanced, because there's several stages into pitching, right? Since the very first cold calling or cold emailing, as you said, up until like calls when a producer wants to talk to you on the phone. That's a big step, but doesn't necessarily mean it's going anywhere. It's halfway through, but it's not there yet. So you always have to be very prepared and think about what you're going to say. I have a funny story about that. I learned this the hard way because when I was 19, I pitched to ESPN like a film event. It was like I just wrote them an email. And they're like, oh, that's awesome. Why don't you come here to the office and pitch that idea to us? They didn't know I was a 19-year-old kid with an idea. So obviously I went very unprepared. And at some point they were like, why are you, what is happening? Who are you? And it's a funny story to tell now, but, it's been a long time and I learned a lesson. You always have to, put your best preparation, put your best presentation, sell yourself, to keep yourself on the radar.
So Juan has another really good question. Taking perception of a video pitch. So what's like the best video? What are the top things that you would suggest prioritizing when you're sending in a pitch? I'm assuming for a specific story idea in 800 characters. Like what things do you mostly focus? What do you prioritize in your pitch? I guess.
Oh, visual. The visual. Okay. I mean, if it's a story about a bank and bankers, I mean, unless that you can use, like footage, like stock footage or something, it's not very visual. You always have to think that for video, aside of the story itself, you also have to provide them with good visual ideas, that are going to wrap the idea in itself. So if it's a kind of a boring story, I would say, like, you're not going to have a lot of visual angles, like offices or things like that. I would say, that's very hard to pitch unless I specifically want that story. So I would say just focus on stories that also have a very visual angle. That's, like protests or robots, things like that. TV stations really want those things too, that have like that really highly impactful visual angle.
It's kind of like the concept if you have something between software and hardware, present a concept of a hardware like a robot, because it's something visual you can see, you can play with, you can have kids playing with it, you can have dogs playing with it. Software, you're going to look at a screen or look at the back of someone's head looking at a screen. And so it's just a much harder sell.
I'll tell you why, because I had that, I pitched those kind of stories also in the past, and I usually would get, the answer like, oh, it's a good story, but we can do this here in the newsroom with stock video, which it's true. I mean, if it's something that they can do, they don't want to spend more money, on the same thing that they can do perfectly for the newsroom.
But go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, unless it's a story that for some reason they're extremely invested in, and you have to do it.
But I guess it also depends on the vehicle, which channel we're talking, because I do a lot of commodity stories, and especially now because of COVID, I can't really film anywhere, so I'm only using stock video, and even the interviews I'm collecting online. So I guess one very important tip, and that works for both questions, because Stina also asked for a written story. But this is I also do film. So when it comes to storytelling, there's a very basic trick which everyone that watches TV shows and films knows, which is the teaser. You have to always start with the first sentence to catch the attention. So just today, I got a green light for a story that I started. That the very first sentence was, "Did you know that 90% of Brazilian log is illegal?" That's it. Question mark. And and then obviously that question by itself caught the attention of the editor. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then the rest of the story, I explain what I was talking about, etc. It's also important to mention something that actually I think I learned from Susana, or Susana and Justin both, that you guys called it the 5 Ws, right? What, why, where, who, and when.
Who, what, when, where.
Right?
Oh,
yeah. Maybe I got the order mixed up, but we get
exactly.
It's the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's the same. But that's a very basic tip, but it's also truly important because I have done 4 pitches where I forgot to use all of those, and people are like, okay, but wait, where exactly is this, or why is this relevant? You know.
And most important, really, is the why. Why is this relevant in the big picture setting? If you can't explain that for the editor or producer to quickly understand, then it's like, why do they care about it? You know, you have to find that why. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I've got a lot of returns from pitching ideas that were like, it's awesome, but it's just like, is there a story in there? Is there, what else can I do with that information? And this is great that you found out that this is happening, but I need more, I need more meat. And then you have to, as a journalist, you can give up, oh, that's too bad, that's a bad pitch, whatever. That's another thing we didn't mention, but it's very important. You have to always be ready to rework on the pitches, and the same pitch, rework on the same pitch at the same time for different channels. That's a very important thing, because sometimes, if you're pitching a story about the fires in the Amazon from a human rights point of view, it's different than pitching from a business point of view, right? A human rights focused website, we want to know about, so how is that threatening the life of the natives in the area, etc. And the business website wants to know, okay, so why are those companies boycotting Brazil? Are they going to hurt Brazilian economy? And so it's a very different, but it's basically the same story. The Amazon is burning, but you have to tell it in different ways, and you have to be ready to always change those pitches.
And one thing, too, that we did recently, we were doing this pitch about glaciers melting and lack of water in different areas for a specific children's show. And we developed the entire pitch. We had the entire research done. And this was an obvious thing that we should have known before we had sent it in. But we sent it in, and then their biggest thing was and then what? Because essentially the problem was, like, there was a very vivid problem that the water, there's much, much less water because of the glaciers melting, because of global warming, and that people were defecating in the swamps and the lagoons and throwing away trash there, and therefore the water was contaminated. But the issue was, this was for a children's program, and they wouldn't have a happy ending. They want to be like, life sucks. And we were so used to being like, oh, we want to show the bad, like, this is the problem. Show the problem. And exactly, you have to know and understand your client. And there's a lot of these, like, oh, duh, I'm an idiot concepts. And so obviously we changed it and added and found a different piece. But something that would help you out before you get to that is just really think about your client, who they are, what their specific needs are, and creating a pitch based upon that. Is there anything that you guys want to talk about for a written piece that they were asking for, Susana?
I mean, I don't do print, haven't done it, I think, for like a year and a half. But I would say generally the same thing. The good thing with print is that because you don't have to count, to factor in the visual side of it, in a sense it's easier because you don't have to give them the core of the story and also the visual side. So I would say think about the story that, like what we've been talking about, except the visual side. Tell them who you would interview. Don't give names. Actually, I'm saying that because I see that Jan was asking about that. I never give names. I just say, maybe I say a human rights organization that deals with this issue, things like that. Don't give names because, then you're increasing the chance that somebody may steal your. And it did happen to me, by the way. And I found out in a very nasty way. An intern called me accidentally, asking, "Oh, do you have the number for such and such?" Like, they told me they weren't gonna run the story. Mm-hmm. So it happens sometimes. It's still worth it to continue. It will happen to the best of us.
And I think too, like when it happens, it can be a specific editor. or person within the publication. It's not the entire publication. So you can still make a lot of money off the publication, just avoid that one editor that was not professional. Chris, what were you saying?
No, I was just gonna say that to answer also both questions. But I've been working on a few written stories right now, and it's I mean this is weird to say, but I feel like written stories are expected on the pitch at least are expected a more in-depth journalism per se. You know, it actually the pitch has to be more because you have to it's the opposite of a picture speaks 1,000 words. Actually, you know, with words you have a much more better space to go deeper in the research. While with video, you have to, you know, even if you get 4 or 5 minutes of a story in video, you know, 3 minutes are going to be interviews or sound bites, and so you don't have a whole lot of time. What happens to me a lot, and I hate it. It's the worst part of the job to me. It's when they send a script and the script returns from the channels like cut in half. Like, okay, we don't need that. They clear a lot of information. They're like, this is very important information. We're like, well, we'll only have 3 minutes. Sorry, we have to, prioritize something. But written stories, you have to really not be afraid of. You can, in one sentence, mention 3 very, very relevant facts, and no one's going to cut up one sentence, So I would say that for pitching a written story, you really can use a more in-depth look. And as for John's question about stealing, this is a risk we always. It's part of it, either it's journalism or film, TV, or literature, whatever you do. It's always a risk. But again, you know what? You have to put yourself out there. You can protect yourself in certain ways, like Susana mentioned, not mentioning names, not giving too much information. But this is always something you are at risk. What you have to do is always make sure that you work with people that you can rely. And once you realize you cannot trust them, then you just never speak to them again. That's pretty much what I do. I try to just be near people that have integrity because, I know that I have integrity. So I just try to find people that have integrity as well. But I have a colleague here in Brazil, which is a very, very famous writer here. So she got a lot of people are always looking at everything she says, and she's always prone to get her stuff stolen. But she said, you know what? You're not that important. People are not going to be desperately looking to steal from you. So just throw your ideas out there, and you have to put yourself out there, even with the risk.
I think part of it too is like understanding the risk of if you're pitching to someone who you've done projects with before. They like Chris was mentioning earlier, like the importance of building long-term relationships. They're probably looking more at you as a long-term relationship. Whereas if you're cold calling someone new, you have no idea exactly about their level of integrity and professionalism and what they'll end up doing with it. And so you have to be, as much as you want to make that money, sometimes like you mentioned with that specific, extremely catchy, interesting story, you have to be a little careful of.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think from my perspective in business, like the fact that a lot of people like nervous about sharing their business idea or something, but the reality is 90% of the work is implementation. So even though someone may like it and want to do it, but they still have to then go find someone to do it who's actually quality enough to get it done and get the context and make it work. Sometimes they can do it, not a problem, like it's very feasible, it can be done, but it's not as likely as people often think. But it does happen. So
yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it's always, it's a risk, but it's a risk you have to take. There's nothing you can do about it. If they want to do it, they're going to do it. Eventually, you will most likely find out, and then you can ditch that client.
And then name and
tell others. That's what I did.
Or expose them.
Tell
Exactly. And expose them. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I don't think we talked about how to land new gigs. How important it is also to have a network of people that can help you. Like, I work here, or I know that they have an opening, or things like, or you see someone on your Facebook feed or Twitter that is freelancing for someone else. So you can ask, like, oh, hey, I'm here in California. Do you know if they need anyone? Can you give me the email? Very important too, and a great source of new gigs as well.
Okay. Absolutely. This is actually very important, especially for starting and you don't have a byline or a video career yet, like we have links. You one option, this is very important to mention, is to just partner with other journalists that are already more stable in the market, and they can approach editors, and you can both sign the story and share the money. I did that a lot in the beginning, back in 2015, 2016. And I actually got some pretty nice stories published in different places with very awesome journalists that ended up being good. It's a win-win situation because they get their name in the story as well, and they don't have to do a whole lot of work. You do most of the legwork, and then they'll both sign and you share the money. So that's also a very good tip. Of course, you have to find a journalist that you trust and someone that is nice to work with, and all that is very important. But that's I agree. I couldn't agree more with Susana. Having a community, having people that you can exchange information, exchange ideas, and all of that. And especially just to conclude, globally nowadays, cross-border stories are so common. Like especially now during COVID, that we're it kind of became okay to interview people online. And that's just awesome because, suddenly I found myself, wait a second, if I want to interview this guy in China, I can just give him a call. I don't have to hire someone to go there, and then so the world just became much smaller. That's the good part, I guess, of the isolation because.
Yeah. I think that's a trend. Yeah, that's a trend that's not going to end with COVID. Even if COVID ends, I think that's going to continue.
I couldn't agree more. And I think cross-border storytelling sort of had to happen with partnerships as well. And, it's going to become more and more often. I see so many people doing it.
Mm-hmm. Also, I guess when we're talking about freelancing, I think that for better or worse, it's a trend that's just growing. Newsrooms, publications, a lot of new publications don't have a staff or a big staff, so they rely on freelancers. So it's something, again, that's just going to get bigger and bigger in the future, to the point that probably many newsrooms won't even have like a full dedicated staff. They will just rely on freelancers. Whether that's good or bad, that's everyone's guess. But that's going to happen. That's where we're headed, because news publications don't want to pay a lot. They don't want to pay insurance. They don't want to pay Social Security. This is something that is happening, so we have to adapt. So I guess that's why HackPack, they're doing now a great job with the insurance that they're giving their freelancers. That's actually a really nice plus, because with my clients right now, honestly, I don't have. If something happens to me out there in the field, it's on me.
Yeah, no, but that's why we're part of HackPack, because we really came up with this community. It really feels good to be a part, even when having a bad week. We have people to complain about. Justin and Susana know that I'm always complaining to them. I'm having a horrible week. So it's you have those. They understand me. They have to pretend. Oh, it's okay. We care. We're gonna.
Yeah, so it's always nice to talk to someone who actually understands whatever you're going through, whether it's like, I've had like a lot of rejections, in this past few days. I feel that everyone rejects me, even my cat rejects me. We've all been there, and the best thing you can do is talk about that with other people who understand you.
100%.
Well, do you guys have any final questions? There we go. We got one. First, final questions about pitching or getting new clients. Last thing, I think you've pretty much touched on everything so far, but giving one last chance if you feel the need. No need.
Yeah, I think again, just stress on how persistent you have to be. That would be, if I were to to resume in just one small piece of advice to either new or even more seasoned freelancers who are frustrated. Don't give up. Be persistent. Nudge, 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 and you will get what you want. Whether it's in a few months, in a year, you will eventually amass a nice pool of solid clients. But you have to persist.
Yeah, and I would add, if I were to add also in one sentence, it would be persist and have good stories. Find good stories. There. As we're speaking right now, there's so many stories that are not being told. Just do your research. Have a list of very interesting pitches to offer, good stories to tell. Do that part of the work as well. There's sales, but there's also actual journalism, which is also the very fun part of the work, which is just finding stories. Sometimes it's just a matter of leave Google aside and just go for a walk and realize, wait a second, what's happening in that particular area of the world that no one is talking about? Let me check if something is going on there, and then suddenly you find yourself facing a very cool story. So also my final advice is that have good stories, have good pitches, study them, research them, prepare them well.
Yeah, you can always find really good stories in local newspapers, local stations. Yeah, I find a lot on there, and then I just maybe adjust also the angle depending on the publication, like more Hispanic side, more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I want to thank Chris and Susana for sharing so much great information. As I mentioned, this entire conversation has been recorded, so we'll go ahead and put that up on YouTube, and then we'll also create a short blog. So this way you don't have to watch the entire hour to get out all the great suggestions and advice. From HackPack, we're really glad to put these on to help you all become more professional as well as better entrepreneurs of what you're doing. As I mentioned, we'll have HackPack version 2.0 coming out in September. We'll have a virtual launch thanks to COVID and the fact that we're so global toward the end of September, and I'll be announcing that probably next week to get people to start knowing about it, when it's at, etc. Basically, version 2.0 is going to be amazing on mobile, which we're very excited about. It's going to be much, much more simplified and make it a lot easier for people to be able to create requests to hire folks, as well as to be able to apply to them, communicate, and negotiate on them all. And beyond that, it's going to have the ability to send direct invoices, and it makes it a lot easier for us to be able to give clients the ability to manage and source freelancers, but also ensure that you all have insurance, invoice it out for them, and make it easier for their accounting processes. That way, they're more likely to use it, both to hire you all, but also to manage their existing freelancers and get them paid. So beyond that, we're adding in a WhatsApp alerts version as well, so not just SMS alerts, but WhatsApp alerts that will enable you
I also want to mention before we leave, Justin, that if anybody wants to reach out to me for more questions, or maybe, I don't mind sharing also the examples of the pitches that I make, or sharing, examples of conversations. I'm more than happy to share them with anyone who wants to see them.
Wonderful.
Yeah, me too. I'll put my email here on the chat.
Okay, I think you can find me on HackPack.
Yeah.
Susana Mendoza.
Yes.
Exactly. So thank you very much. We'll be sending this stuff out. Appreciate you spending your time learning and sharing and asking great questions. Best of luck throughout this week as you go out and make some pitches and try to bring in more clients. And we'll be sharing more of this information, some keywords to search in Twitter or Facebook, groups to look at. And so hopefully you can do even a better job. So best of luck, and looking forward to you at the next one or on our virtual launch party. So have a great week.
Good luck and stay resilient.
Yes, exactly. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you so much. And thank you, Susana.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Always a